The Clippers were still running when the first shot hit. October 25th, 1957. Park Sheraton Hotel, Barbershop, New York. 10:24 a.m. Arthur Grasso had been cutting hair for 19 years. Same chair, same shop, same steady hands that never shook, no matter who sat in front of him. They were shaking now. He'd stepped to the back for a fresh towel. 30 seconds, maybe 40, when he heard it. Not one sound. 4 sounds, rapid, deafening in the small tiled room. He pressed himself against the supply room wall. Didn't breathe. Heard 2 men's footsteps crossing the marble floor. Heard the glass door swing open. Heard nothing after that except the clippers, still buzzing on the counter, and something wet dripping onto the floor. When Arthur finally looked out, Albert Anastasia, the man they called the Lord High Executioner, the man who had ordered more deaths than any other figure in American organized crime, was slumped in chair number 4. 2 bullets in the back of the head, 1 in the hip, 1 in the hand, raised at the last second to shield himself. The hand hadn't helped. Anastasia's face was still covered with the hot towel Arthur had placed there 4 minutes earlier. He'd never seen it coming. What nobody in that barbershop knew, what wouldn't be understood for years, was that the 2 men who walked out through that glass door had been sent by someone who was sitting in an apartment in Naples, Italy, 5,000 miles away. Lucky Luciano had made the call, and what led him to that decision would reveal something about power that most men never live long enough to learn. Mino, to understand what happened that morning, you need to understand who Albert Anastasia was, and what he had become by 1957. He was 60 years old, born in Calabria, came to America at 16, worked the docks, killed his first man at 18 over a territory dispute at the Brooklyn waterfront. He was tried for that murder. 4 witnesses, open and shut case. 3 of the 4 witnesses disappeared before the trial. The 4th developed amnesia so complete he couldn't remember his own name in court. Anastasia walked free. That was 1921. He spent the next 36 years refining the process. He became the operational head of Murder Incorporated, the enforcement arm that carried out killings for hire across organized crime. Conservative estimates put the body count at over 100. Some said higher. Lucky Luciano had known Anastasia since the early days, had used him, trusted him in the specific way you trust a weapon, completely, for its intended purpose, and with the understanding that weapons need to be controlled. For decades, Anastasia had been controlled. By 1957, he wasn't. The problem had been building for 18 months. Anastasia was expanding, not gradually, aggressively, moving into other families' territories without commission approval, extorting operations that belonged to bosses who sat at the same table he did. But the incident that made it unmanageable happened in June 1957. Arnold Schuster was a 24-year-old bank clerk from Brooklyn. He'd spotted FBI fugitive Willie Sutton on a subway train, reported it to police, and watched the news coverage of Sutton's subsequent arrest with the satisfaction of a man who'd done the right thing. He'd had nothing to do with organized crime. Never had. Just a young man who'd recognized a face from a wanted poster. Anastasia saw him on television. "I can't stand squealers," Anastasia told his men. Hit him. His men pointed out that Schuster had nothing to do with the mob, that killing a random civilian who'd turned in an unconnected bank robber would bring federal heat unlike anything they'd seen. Anastasia didn't care. Arnold Schuster was shot twice in the groin and twice in the eyes on a Brooklyn street corner 3 weeks later. The FBI went to war, congressional hearings, Senate investigations, national press. Every organized crime figure in America became a target of renewed federal scrutiny because Albert Anastasia had ordered the murder of a 24-year-old bank clerk who had nothing to do with anything. That was when Lucky Luciano started making calls from Naples. But here's what nobody understood about Lucky Luciano in 1957. He'd been in Italy for 11 years, officially powerless, officially irrelevant. American newspapers had stopped writing about him. He'd spent those 11 years making himself invisible, and invisible men can move pieces on a board that nobody is watching. Lucky made contact through Meyer Lansky first, a meeting in Miami. Lansky flew down for what his travel records listed as a vacation. "Albert has to go," Lucky said. Meyer didn't argue. Didn't ask why. He already knew why. Everyone knew why. "Genovese wants it too," Meyer said. "He's been pushing for it for months." "I know." Lucky's voice was flat. "Let Genovese think it's his idea. Let him set it up. Let him take the credit." Meyer looked at him. "Why? Because if it's Genovese's operation, it's Genovese's exposure. And when the commission asks questions after, Genovese's the one answering them." Meyer was quiet for a moment. "And if Genovese moves against you next?" Uses the same method. Lucky picked up his coffee, took a slow sip. Then I'll deal with Genovese next. One problem at a time. Maya nodded. That was always the answer with Lucky. One problem at a time. In sequence, no emotion, just sequence. The plan moved forward. Vito Genovese received what he believed was an independent idea, confirmation from multiple directions that the commission would support Anastasia's removal. He organized it, found the shooters, set the timeline. 2 men from the Genovese family, professional, clean records, never connected to Anastasia directly. They'd been watching the Park Sheraton barbershop for 11 days. Anastasia came every Friday morning, same time, same chair, same routine. Routine is the enemy of survival, and Albert Anastasia had survived so long that he'd stopped being afraid. That was his mistake. October 25th, 1957, 10:20 a.m. Anastasia arrived at the barbershop with his usual bodyguard, except his bodyguard that morning had been told, through channels too indirect to trace, that he was needed elsewhere. An urgent errand. Be back in an hour. The bodyguard left. Anastasia settled into chair 4, handed his jacket to Arthur Grasso, leaned back as the hot towel went over his face. He said one thing before the towel covered him. Make it quick today, Arthur. I've got a noon meeting. Arthur said nothing. Just began the routine. Steam, towel, quiet, in the wall mirror. If Anastasia had been watching, if the towel hadn't covered his eyes, he might have seen the door open at 10:24 a.m. He wasn't watching. The 2 men wore scarves pulled high, hats pulled low. They didn't run, didn't shout, didn't announce themselves in any way. They walked directly to chair 4. The first shot hit Anastasia in the left hand. He'd sensed the movement through some animal instinct, started to raise his arm, started to turn, too late, not fast enough. The hot towel fell from his face. His eyes opened. He saw the mirror, saw the men, saw the guns. He said nothing. There was no time. He lurched forward out of the chair. Pure instinct. Move, get up, fight. 30 years of survival screaming at his body to do something. The second shot caught him in the hip. He spun hard to the left, hit the glass shelf below the mirror with his shoulder. Bottles of aftershave and talc exploded across the marble floor. Glass everywhere. The sharp chemical smell of cologne mixing with gunpowder. Anastasia hit the floor on his hands and knees, still trying, still fighting, crawling toward the door like a man who had survived everything and couldn't accept that this was different. The third shot stopped the crawling. The fourth was insurance. Albert Anastasia, the man who had ordered over 100 murders, the man who had run Murder Incorporated for 2 decades, the man who had made 4 eyewitnesses disappear and walked out of a courtroom smiling, died face down on a barbershop floor, broken glass around him, talcum powder settling like snow on his shoulders. The hot towel lay 3 feet away, still steaming. The 2 men stepped over him, walked back through the lobby, through the revolving door, into a waiting car. Neither looked back. It took Arthur Grasso 7 minutes to stop shaking enough to stand. Another 4 to reach the phone. His hands left blood on the receiver. Not his blood. He hadn't been touched. He would wash his hands 4 times before the police arrived. They still didn't feel clean. The 2 shooters were through the lobby and into a waiting car before anyone on the street understood what they'd heard. The car drove calmly through Midtown Manhattan traffic. No speeding, no running lights. A completely ordinary car driven by a completely ordinary driver who pulled over 14 blocks away and let both men out. They split up, walked in opposite directions. Neither was ever identified. Neither was ever charged. The case remains officially unsolved. The commission met 3 days later. Every boss in New York present. The Anastasia situation required formal acknowledgement, even if nobody would say out loud what everyone knew. Vito Genovese spoke first, at length, about stability, about the damage Anastasia had been doing, about the Schuster murder and the federal heat, about the necessity of what had happened. He spoke like a man who had solved a problem, who deserved recognition. The room listened politely. Lucky Luciano was not in that room. He was in Naples, but Maya Lansky was there, watching, reporting back. When Maya's account reached Lucky by courier 4 days later, Lucky read it twice, then wrote a single line in response. Genovese thinks he's made himself untouchable. Note the date. Maya received the note, understood it immediately. Genovese had overplayed his position, had used the Anastasia situation to consolidate power in ways the commission hadn't sanctioned, had made himself, in the weeks following Anastasia's death, into exactly the kind of uncontrolled boss that Anastasia had been. He'd learned the wrong lesson. 18 months later, in 1959, Vito Genovese was arrested on drug charges, convicted, sentenced to 15 years. The evidence that convicted him had been assembled carefully, through channels. Over time, Lucky Luciano's name appeared nowhere in the investigation. It never did. Arthur Grasso reopened the barbershop 3 weeks after the shooting. New glass shelf, new mirror. He moved chair 4 to the back of the room and never put a customer in it again. He worked until he was 71, cut hair for 5 more decades. And in all that time, in all those thousands of conversations with customers who asked about that Friday morning, he said the same thing. I heard 4 shots. I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. He meant it both ways. 20 years after the shooting, a journalist tracked him down for an anniversary piece. Mr. Grasso, do you think about that morning? Arthur set down his clippers, looked at the reporter. I think about the towel, he said. The towel. I put a hot towel on that man's face, covered his eyes, told him to relax. He paused. 3 minutes later, he was dead on my floor. I've thought about that towel every day for 20 years. He picked up his clippers and went back to work. Some men carried the weight of what they saw. Lucky Luciano carried the weight of what he decided. The difference was that only one of them could sleep afterward. If this story showed you what real power looks like from the shadows, hit subscribe. We're uncovering the decisions made in silence that changed history loudly. The orders given 5,000 miles away. The moves that were never traced back. Turn on notifications. Lucky Luciano's reach extended further than anyone realized, even after exile. Drop a comment. Was Lucky right to order Anastasia's removal? Or was this just one king removing another? Lucky Luciano, 1897–1962. The man who gave no orders in writing. The boss who moved from exile. The shadow that fell across every barbershop chair in New York. Rest in power.